at 0204 hours. A recovery operation under U.S. authority holds on uneven ground where a military aircraft comes down earlier in the night. The senior enlisted on the ground is a U.S. Air Force staff sergeant qualified in rescue, responsible for accountability inside an improvised landing zone she does not control but must answer for. Rotor wash hammers dirt and loose gear as a helicopter idles exposed, skids biting and sliding while darkness compresses the space. Signal clarity degrades. Chem lights flicker at the perimeter, stretched thin across broken terrain, and visibility falls under 100 yards as dust and exhaust hang low. Fuel time drops below planned margin. Her wrist-mounted timer counts, fuel burn minute by minute. A cracked headset mic carries clipped traffic, then silence, then traffic again. An abort order comes down through U.S. officers monitoring the operation from distance. Cleanly worded, lawful, and final in tone. Abort order received. The radio pops once and goes quiet. Perimeter integrity weakens. One aircrew member remains unlocated inside the crash radius. Leaving now risks abandoning a service member. Staying risks an aircraft on the ground with fuel bleeding away. Fuel window shrinks again. The staff sergeant's authority is limited to execution, not permission, but liability rests with her where boots meet dirt. Command does not see the same picture. The next transmission decides what breaks first. Nothing pauses here. Rotors idle. Dust hangs low, and the recovery clock keeps moving while fuel bleeds down under 100 yards of visibility. The recovery window tightens. Full context matters. If you are following this operation, subscribe so this record continues. Say where you are listening from right now, and stay with the timeline as decisions move through the chain of command. The mission remains active and unresolved still. The aircraft goes down earlier in the night during what is categorized as a routine movement under U.S. Air Force authority. There is no hostile action reported at the time of the incident. There is no immediate indication of mechanical sabotage. The loss is logged, coordinates passed, and a standard recovery sequence initiates. Weather remains marginal, but flyable. Wind moves steadily across open ground, carrying dust and exhaust that reduce contrast under night vision. Visibility fluctuates, but generally holds under 100 yards. Terrain is uneven, a mix of compacted dirt and broken surface that complicates footing and vehicle placement. The recovery mission exists for a single purpose: account for personnel, secure sensitive material, and clear the site before conditions degrade further. This is not an improvisation. It is a rehearsed response with defined roles, timelines, and authority. The senior enlisted on the ground is a U.S. Air Force staff sergeant, rescue qualified, designated as the ground team lead. She controls movement inside the landing zone, establishes the perimeter, and executes tasking. She does not authorize continuation or abort. That authority remains with U.S. officers monitoring the operation through established command channels. Operational control flows from higher headquarters through watch officers who track fuel, weather, and risk tolerance. Execution authority flows downward. Responsibility for lives on the ground concentrates upward once decisions are made. Medical gear stages immediately on arrival. Headlamp beams sweep the ground as kits are opened and checked. Oxygen, airway tools, and litter systems are laid out in order. Nothing is rushed. Everything is deliberate. Visibility drops another increment. Chem lights mark the recovery area in measured intervals, outlining a perimeter sized for the terrain rather than convenience. Each light represents a position that must be held, observed, and reported. A tablet mounted near the landing zone displays fuel margins, weather bands, and medevac windows. Numbers update in real time. No alarms yet. Margins are acceptable, but tightening. Rotor noise. Cycles in the distance as aircraft reposition and hold. Engines spool down, then up again, maintaining readiness without committing to a timeline they do not control. Signal clarity degrades slightly. Radio traffic remains clipped and professional. Call signs are exchanged. Status reports pass without commentary. A handset moves from one gloved hand to another as updates are relayed and acknowledged. A map board sits on the ground, weighed down at the corners. Grease pencil lines mark approach routes, crash radius, and contingency positions. Nothing on the board suggests urgency yet. Fuel margin drops by another minute. The staff sergeant moves deliberately between positions, checking spacing, confirming lines of sight, and verifying that each assigned role understands the tasking. Her posture communicates control without urgency. This is still a managed operation. Wind increases briefly, pushing dust across the lights and reducing contrast further. Night vision struggles, then recovers. Weather trend holds but worsens. Command monitors from distance using feeds, reports, and predictive models. The picture is clean. The timeline appears intact. Risk remains within acceptable thresholds. On the ground, the picture is more textured. Terrain irregularities limit sightlines. Sound carries unpredictably. The perimeter feels longer than planned. Fuel remains within limits. Routine recovery. Until it isn't. The first subtle mismatch appears when a ground observation does not align with the remote feed. It is minor. It is logged. No one escalates yet. Signal noise increases again. The system continues to function, but the tolerance is thinning. The next update will test whether the picture remains shared or begins to diverge. The recovery remains active as the night deepens and margins tighten. Nothing resets. The same uneven ground shifts under boots. Chem lights continue to mark the perimeter in fixed intervals. Wind and rotor wash keep dust suspended, cutting contrast and shortening effective visibility to under 100 yards. Remote sensors show no confirmed contact inside the perimeter. The ground team reports intermittent movement outside the light. Both inputs are logged without interpretation. Visibility drops again. The U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant maintains control of execution inside the landing zone. She moves methodically between positions, checking spacing at 50 yards, then 70, then pulling the outer markers in by another 10. Each adjustment is reported up the chain without commentary. Command receives the updates and acknowledges. Timelines remain unchanged. Fuel margin decreases by another minute. Red light medical checks continue beside the landing zone. Airway gear is rechecked. Tourniquets are staged. A litter is repositioned to shorten carry distance if needed. These actions are routine, but their repetition signals anticipation. Signal clarity fluctuates. A tablet near the perimeter updates weather bands and medevac windows. The numbers still align with continuation, but the buffer is thinning. No thresholds are crossed yet. Ground eyes report movement again at approximately 120 yards. Sensors remain clean. The discrepancy is noted. Picture mismatch. The radio handset warms in the staff sergeant's gloved hand as transmissions increase in frequency. She reports facts only. Distance, direction, duration. No speculation. Abort guidance is reiterated from above. The language is unchanged. Continue to monitor. Maintain perimeter. Advise if conditions worsen. Perimeter integrity tightens. The staff sergeant adjusts spacing again, compressing the footprint to reduce exposure. This shortens reaction time but increases congestion near the aircraft. The trade-off is accepted and logged. Fuel gauge edges closer to warning. Engines cycle at low power to conserve fuel while remaining ready to lift. Rotor noise rises, then settles, creating a steady mechanical thrum beneath radio traffic. Time advances to 0218 hours. Weather remains marginal. Wind gusts intermittently, pushing debris across the lights and degrading contrast. Night vision struggles, then stabilizes. Ground reports movement a third time, closer now, briefly crossing a gap between chem lights. Sensors still show nothing. Command requests clarification. The staff sergeant repeats the observation with measured detail. Direction of travel, duration, distance, no interpretation. She remains within her lane. Signal noise increases again. Remote command acknowledges and advises to hold. No change to Abort posture. No additional assets committed. The recovery window remains open on paper. Fuel margin drops into the final buffer. Medical checks pause as personnel shift attention outward. No one raises a voice. Procedures remain intact. The map board is updated. Grease pencil marks are erased and redrawn to reflect the compressed perimeter. The crash radius remains unchanged. The missing aircrew member is still unaccounted for. Abort guidance repeats. Unchanged. The staff sergeant notes that perimeter compression reduces visibility overlap. This is reported upward. The acknowledgement is brief. Visibility falls below 90 yards. The helicopter remains exposed on the ground. Fuel continues to bleed down minute by minute. The medevac window tightens as weather bands creep closer. Time advances to 0225 hours. Sensors continue to indicate no contact. Ground eyes continue to report movement. Neither input invalidates the other. Together, they create uncertainty. The staff sergeant requests confirmation of fuel thresholds. Command responds with the same numbers previously provided. No escalation. Fuel gauge enters warning band. Engines cycle again, briefly increasing rotor wash and further degrading visibility. The dust settles slowly. Signal clarity stabilizes, then drops. Another ground observation is reported. Closer than the last. Still outside the light. Still brief. Still unconfirmed by sensors. Abort guidance is repeated for the third time. The tone remains neutral. The directive remains advisory until a threshold is crossed. Perimeter control strains. The staff sergeant compresses the perimeter one final increment. This places personnel within closer proximity to the aircraft and each other. Reaction time improves. Exposure increases. Time advances to 0231 hours. Fuel margin reaches the minimum planned reserve. The system continues to function, but the tolerance is nearly exhausted. Each additional minute shifts risk from the timeline to the people holding the line. Remote command maintains the same picture. Ground reports continue to diverge. No single data point forces a decision yet. The next update will not be absorbed the same way. The recovery reaches a point where observation must become record. The environment does not change. Uneven ground still shifts underfoot. Chem lights continue to flicker against wind and rotor wash. Visibility remains under 100 yards. Engines idle low, holding readiness without committing to movement. The U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant recognizes that continued verbal updates no longer resolve the mismatch. She does not argue. She assembles. Movement patterns observed earlier are plotted on the tablet. Direction of travel, duration, distance in yards from the perimeter. The data is time-stamped. Locations are fixed relative to the crash radius. This is not interpretation. It is position and sequence. Recording initiated. A chem light is moved and set to mark the last observed position. The placement shortens a gap in the perimeter without expanding the footprint. This is reported upward as a factual adjustment. Fuel time is updated. Remaining margin is stated plainly. Time on station is logged as 0237 hours. Fuel status acknowledged. Medical status is transmitted next. Personnel accounted for on the ground. One aircrew member still unlocated within the crash radius. No change, no assumption. The radio handset keys. Her transmission is measured and complete. It contains no recommendation. It contains no language of urgency. It contains data. Transmission sent. Wind carries dust across the lights again, briefly reducing contrast. The staff sergeant waits. Engines continue to idle. No one moves. Confirmation of receipt follows after a short pause. Data packet received. The radio clicks once and then goes quiet. For several seconds, only engine noise and wind are audible. This silence is not uncertainty. It is review. Remote command now has the same picture the ground has held for the last several minutes. Movement patterns are no longer anecdotal. Fuel margins are no longer theoretical. The perimeter geometry is no longer abstract. Guidance is requested internally. Time advances to 0239 hours. The staff sergeant maintains the compressed perimeter. No further movement is observed. Sensors still show no confirmed contact. The two inputs are now reconciled on record. Perimeter stabilized. Command returns with clarified guidance. The abort posture remains in effect, but execution is now tied to documented thresholds rather than assumption. Authority remains above the ground element. Responsibility is no longer diffuse. Fuel margin confirmed. The staff sergeant acknowledges without comment. She does not request permission. She does not argue for continuation. Her role remains execution and accountability. Engines cycle slightly, then settle back to idle. Rotor wash lifts debris and drops it again. Visibility holds. Decision on record. The phrase is spoken once, not as emphasis, but as fact. A recorded order follows. It references the transmitted data. It references fuel status. It references personnel accountability. The language is formal and specific. It assigns responsibility to the issuing authority. Recorded order acknowledged. The immediate threat is contained by clarity rather than force. The perimeter holds. No further movement is reported inside the light. The aircraft remains exposed, but managed. Fuel remains within the newly defined margin. Time advances to 0, 2, 4, 3 hours. The staff sergeant logs the acknowledgement and resumes monitoring. The situation is still dangerous, but it is no longer ambiguous. Every subsequent action will trace back to this moment of record. Guidance clarified. Wind continues to move across open ground. Engines remain ready. The night does not ease, but control returns to the system. The operation continues under documented authority. The landing zone is quiet at first light. Uneven ground settles where rotor wash cut shallow scars. Engines sit at idle no longer. They are cold. Visibility opens beyond 100 yards, and the perimeter markers are collected rather than guarded. What matters now is not the moment of pressure, but the record that follows it. Authority does not weaken when it is examined. It holds when actions are traceable and decisions are owned. After action report submitted, the staff sergeant transitions from execution to documentation. Observations become entries. Times remain in 4-digit military format, followed by the word hours. Distances remain spoken in yards. Fuel margins are written exactly as read. Nothing is smoothed. Signatures in review. Reports move upward through U.S. Air Force officers who are accountable for what they authorize. The review is quiet. There is no briefing theater. A clipboard receives signatures. A folder closes. Responsibility remains intact because it is visible. Accountability matters. This is not about ignoring orders. It is about issuing them with full information and receiving them with discipline. Command authority persists because it accepts evidence from the ground and records how that evidence changes risk. Keys tap briefly in a quiet operations space. Paper shifts. Air moves without urgency. No music intrudes because none is needed. Personnel accountability confirmed. Doctrine outlasts a single night. Process outlasts personality. When pressure rises, the system does not ask for heroes. It asks for accuracy. When danger passes, it asks for documentation. The operation stands as intended. Lawful authority exercised, responsibility assigned, and trust preserved through record. The next mission inherits a clearer standard, and the chain of command remains strong because it is accountable. Continuity endures beyond dawn, guiding decisions tomorrow with the same restraint, clarity, and obligation shown here under established doctrine and law. The landing zone sits empty under low light. Disturbed ground shows where rotors once cut in. Visibility extends beyond 100 yards. No aircraft remains. Chem lights are gone, and the perimeter is no longer active. A radio lies unused on the dirt. The mission clock is stopped. Responsibility does not stop with it. Mission clock confirmed stopped. Orders originate remotely through officers who never touch the ground. Judgment occurs within arm's reach of risk. Each path carries a signature, and each signature carries consequence. Who owns the call? Silence holds. Then a single radio squelch breaks it and fades. Choose one. Execute the abort exactly as issued, preserving aircraft and timelines while accepting the risk that personnel remain unverified, or delay the abort to confirm accountability on the ground, accepting increased exposure and fuel costs to protect people first. State your choice in the comments. Record signature carries responsibility. Morning light settles over the landing zone. Scuffed ground lies quiet. Visibility extends beyond 100 yards. Wind moves steadily across open terrain, and distant aircraft noise returns to routine patterns. No urgency remains here. A helicopter lifts away without haste. Another mission cycles elsewhere. A closed mission folder rests on a desk. Documentation persists after engines shut down. Authority flows forward, unchanged, because the record holds. Area, confirmed, clear. Mission file, closed. Next mission queued. This channel exists to document what happens when procedures are tested, not to celebrate outcomes. Records endure. Decisions carry forward. Readiness depends on what is written down and reviewed without noise. If this work matters to you, like the channel and subscribe. Stay connected so the next operation is on your record as well. The next mission is already waiting.